All right, welcome to the show. Please tell us your name. Where are you calling from?
Hi, it's Steve Ross. I'm Brooklyn,
Steve.
New York. How you doing?
Welcome, brother. How are you?
Oh, great. So there's an old question that I had. I'm looking through Matthew. I'm going through the New Testament to learn what I need to say to people. I think it's Matthew 2:2. It says that the three wise guys came to worship Jesus. Now, I'm thinking, I know Rabbi Singer says that it's in the Greco-Roman sense, but I'm starting to wonder if there are different writers of the New Testament. Are they schizophrenic? Or, like, what does it mean to worship? I mean, if you look at it, maybe that's the reason the Council of Nicaea had to figure things out, because they didn't know what the heck was going on, because it was giving different messages. So I just wanted to know, like, what that means.
Okay, cool.
If it's
All right, thank you, Stephen.
It comes as a surprise to people who go to church every midnight mass and watch the infancy narratives play out. And it's often thought that there are three wise men in Matthew. Actually, the number is not given. I think the number 3 came up because of how many presents they gave them. So the question is, because in Matthew chapter 2, we are told, right at the opening, chapter 2, verse 2, that the wise men who came from the east, who presumably not Jewish, came to worship him following a star, which brought them first to Herod's palace, and from there they went further to Bethlehem. The question is, it says here that they worshipped him, meaning they came to worship the baby Jesus. That means that they came to worship him as a god. And the question you're asking is, we see in the Gospels, in many of the Gospels, that Jesus is not a god and is not equal to God and is subordinate to God and is a servant of God and is someone who God sends and is someone, and Jesus, we are told many times that Jesus asked God, take this cup, not as my will, but as your will. They have a different will. Take this cup from me. In the book of Mark, Jesus is pouring his heart out. We have in John a gospel with a higher Christology than Matthew, where Jesus explicitly says, the Father is greater than me. Well, how could that be? So is it schizophrenic? So the answer is that in Matthew 2, the word worship there, the Greek word, doesn't really mean worship as an exclusive worship to God, but it means to adore, to give reverence to. We find many examples of this in Matthew. When Jesus finally gets on the ship that was tossing and turning, we find the same exact Greek word. And in fact, the New Revised Standard Version corrects this and translates the Greek word as to pay homage to. And as I said, Matthew, a book written, let's say about the year 80, maybe 10 years after Mark, 85, 15 years after Mark, we are not finding a Christology that Jesus is the eternal God. In fact, Jesus becomes, both in Matthew and in Luke, becomes the Son of God in its Greek Platonic sense at his conception. This infancy narrative of Matthew is really a setup, and that's what I think people miss. The infancy narrative in Matthew includes non-Jews coming from the East to pay homage or to give reverence to Jesus. That's the point. But the point is that the Jews reject Jesus, and Herod, the king of the Jews, wants to kill the little Jesus. In fact, the slaughter of the innocents that we find in Matthew's infancy narrative is found nowhere else in the New Testament. And of course, there's no historical record that every baby boy in Bethlehem was killed. But the key is that Matthew has this passage there because what's going to happen later in Matthew, in the Passion narrative, particularly Matthew 27, is that you have another scene, a scene with Jews and Gentiles, and they're juxtaposed against each other. On the one hand, you have Pontius Pilate and his wife. The wife of Pilate is only mentioned in the book of Matthew. And the wife is pleading and saying, based on a dream, this Gentile couple is saying this man is completely innocent. And the Jews are screaming, crucify him, and we take his blood upon ourselves and our children. So what we have in this text is the opening and closing. The opening is the Jews and the Gentiles. How do they handle the birth of Jesus? The Gentiles want to revere him, and the Jews want to kill him. And at the end of the story, it's the same deal. The Gentiles want to revere him and see him as completely innocent, and the Jews want to kill him. And that's that's how you should, if you want to study the text, understand what is being conveyed in the book of Matthew, which is widely regarded as the most Jewish, is the Jewish gospel. In my mind, it's really the most anti-Jewish gospel. But in any sense, thank you so much for your call.
אדון עולם אשר מלך בטרם כל יציר נברא ועת נעשה בחפצו כל אזי מלך שמו נקרא ואחרי ככלות הכל לבדו ימלוך נורא והוא היה והוא עובר